Kirila, Akekeshi wa makomanda. Eyotwa is socialism. Eyotwa is socialism. Akekeshi wa makirila. Akekeshi wa makomanda. Akekeshi wa makirila. Akekeshi wa makomanda. Eyotwa is socialism. Eyotwa is socialism. Akekeshi wa makirila. Akekeshi wa makomanda. Akekeshi wa makirila. Akekeshi wa makomanda. Eyotwa is socialism. Eyotwa is socialism. Amandla. Thanks, comrades. I'm asked to do a very critical task here, and that is a task of debriefing delegates of Congress. Because when we are given a task that is hot, that we're supposed to carry it out, at the end, it's important that you have got to have a debrief so that you don't carry that into the future so that you're effective. So this declaration is meant to capture the work that, the mood of the work that we have done, and also our mood, and also capture what is it that we are looking forward to into the future. I am trying to load it now. I'm trying to load it now. Okay, where is the sharing? Okay. Is it the correct one? Yeah? Yeah, I couldn't get in the number. Is it the correct one? Yeah? Oh. Ikhona into engiyenzile. Bishop, you have an... Okay, I see.
Oba indele nzela
ndlela
Siyamba.
ifuna abalungileyo ifuna abalungileyo oba indele ndlela
Siyamba.
indele ndlela oba indele ndlela
Siyamba.
oba indele ndlela
Siyamba.
ifuna
Ilena.
abalungileyo
Siyamba.
You want to make a submission?
ifuna
If Congress
abalungileyo
Bishop
oba indele ndlela oba indele ndlela
all right, no, it's fine because the
oba
bishop
indele ndlela
because it can be taken to court.
oba indele ndlela
To extend. We did not extend.
ifuna abalungileyo ifuna
Siyamba.
abalungileyo
Siyamba.
oba indele ndlela oba indele ndlela oba indele ndlela oba indele ndlela ifuna abalungileyo
Okay.
ifuna abalungileyo oba indele ndlela oba indele ndlela
Siyamba.
oba indele ndlela
Siyamba.
indele ndlela
Siyamba.
ifuna abalungileyo ifuna abalungileyo oba indele ndlela indele ndlela oba indele ndlela indele ndlela ifuna abalungileyo ifuna
Ifuna
abalungileyo oba indele ndlela indele ndlela oba indele ndlela indele ndlela ifuna abalungileyo ifuna abalungileyo yababa indele ndlela Hey Baba indele ndlela
Hezia.
Hey Baba itelendlela.
Hezia.
Hey Baba itelendlela.
Heziamba.
Au ifuna.
Ifuna abalungile.
Au ifuna.
Ifuna
Abalungile. Yehova itelendlela. Yehova itelendlela. Yehova itelendlela. Yehova itelendlela.
Heziamba.
Au ifuna abalungile. Au ifuna abalungile. Baba itelendlela. Baba itelendlela. Baba itelendlela. Ngoba itelendlela. Au ifuna abalungile. Au ifuna abalungile. Engaba itelendlela.
Heziamba.
Ngoba itelendlela.
Heziamba. Heziamba.
Ifuna abalungile. Ifuna abalungile. Baba itelendlela. Baba itelendlela. Baba itelendlela.
Heziamba. Heziamba. Ifuna
Balungile.
Ifuna
balungile.
abano.
Baba itelendlela. Baba itelendlela. Baba itelendlela. Ngoba itelendlela.
Heziamba yo. Heziamba yo. Heziamba yo. Heziamba yo. Heziamba yo.
If they are still sorting out that thing, you can give the children their award.
Indelendlela. Ndlela
Thank you, comrades.
indlela ndlela esihambayo.
Okay, comrades, what we are going to do, there's some technical work which they are still correcting. We will go to the item on the Cuban Awards. Comrade Africa General Secretary. Oh, okay. Sorry, YCL. Sorry, YCL. Yes, YCL, we are on the floor. YCL is on the floor, yes. Can you open that mic?
Chair,
Yes.
Chair, as the YCL.
Order, order.
Thank you, Chair. My name is Tuani Fawute from the YCLSA. Now, as the 10th province, we feel obliged to also assist the Congress. So just a minor issue, but which might come back as a serious issue if we do not take it seriously ourselves. Our Congress was supposed to be finishing on the 16th. We are already at 2 hours before the 17th. We therefore want to table as the YCL that let there be a motion that the Congress of ours, because it is clear that it might move beyond the 16th. And therefore, we are proposing a motion so that we can protect ourselves. There are others who will be very bitter, taking us to court, all of those things. So let's protect ourselves against that. So the date, as a motion we are proposing, is 13 to 17, not 16. We submit, Chair.
Gauteng. Gauteng,
Thank you very much.
Northwest, KZN.
Thank you very much, Comrade Deputy National Chair. We want to really support the YCL and thank them for being able to make proposals that prevent things. Because last time when Comrade Hope raised the issue of alcohol, we were told that somebody must be drunk first. So we mustn't deal with issues that have not yet happened. So we think this is good foresight. We support.
Are you supporting Northwest?
No, Chair. Let me raise the issue. Indeed, the Congress, it's like as is. When its sessions of the conference go to the next day, it does not officially changes the date of the conference. What appears to be very foreign is when a Congress is in session, and whilst in session, there's a motion to readjust its dates. I think that's the one that is foreign. But if it proceeds to the next day, having not finished its work, it does not have an impact as to when the conference was confirmed. the long debate of the founding Congress as to what exact date was at, because it started and went beyond the day it was started. So I think that there's nothing that could have any contentious contention of 13 to 16. No,
Order,
no, Chair.
order.
No, Chair. One thing that I don't do, I don't get easily intimidated unorganizational.
Why are you responding to that?
No,
Just
no.
speak.
I don't do that. So I'm saying, on our view as the province, the dates do not have to be changed. Thank you.
There's a point of order from the Eastern Cape. Bamba. Tetage.
Chair, I think it would be important that because of the special nature of this National Congress, that the delegates are drawn from the leadership collectives, then with branches. Chair, it's very wrong when then someone having adopted the Congress standing rules, when there's a speaker on the floor, no matter how many disagreements or how strong they are, that you would heckle or interject such a speaker. I think that the provincial secretary of Gauteng must cease from that conduct. Even if it's done by any other person to any speaker, Chair, let's appeal to each other to adhere to the Congress standing rules, even if we've got serious disagreements over what is articulated. Thanks, Chair.
But I called them to order. But that point of yours is sustained. Thank you. Continue, Comrade Northwest. Northwest, were you done?
You know, Chair, we were saying that when it's set for the date, if it goes beyond, there's no reason for Congress to take a resolution that it did not end on the 16th. It's therefore 13 to 17. Because Congress was in session and finalizing its business that it was meant for. In actual fact, even contestation, I don't think there would be anybody in the SACP who intends going to court for a Congress whose days was delayed by business of Congress. But it is good that it is Gauteng that is impatient, because they've projected themselves to be the most disciplined in the past days. It's celebratory mood.
Comrades, order. Order, comrades. What is the harm? What is the harm, Comrade Northwest, to come with that resolution? Just to say, we are recording that we are extending to this 17th day. Is there any harm? There's no harm. Let's not debate this matter further, comrades. Thank you. We gave you enough time. Comrade Soli, we will deal with this award and then Comrade Madala comes.
Amandla, comrades, firstly, Comrade Jenny has brought a gold earring. Lost and found. We are declaring it is available. The one who's got one earring, the other one is here. Now, yesterday we did some awards, and today again we gave to the Mani family representing the Limpopo Matthias. In the absence of the Cuban delegation, yesterday we gave a special recognition award as this Congress to a group of extremely committed revolutionaries of Cuban nationals who are internationalists. Because to be a communist, it's a commitment to all of humanity. And in fact, you should know it's in the Constitution of Cuba to complete an internationalist duty. That is why the Cubans have done so much for the world, especially for the developing countries, Africa, the Middle East, and Latin American countries, selflessly, to fulfill this mission of their communist aspiration. The 14th Congress Central Committee, through this Congress, has awarded the Henry Reeve International Medical Brigade a special recognition award. As the group of comrades, Cuban internationalists, that went to almost 23 countries to combat COVID-19 pandemic, risking their lives to help and save humanity. This brigade was nominated by our South African government and our alliance to receive the Nobel Peace Award. But the liberals in the panel that conduct the Nobel Peace Award came short again of their humanity, because capitalism can never complete its humanity. They did not recognize this brigade. We have agreed to give this award. Now that the ambassador of Cuba is here, we want him to come forward and accept on behalf of South African people and the South African Communist Party this award to the Henry Reeve International Medical Brigade that also participated in our country and many other parts of the world. They stopped this pandemic in Italy, in Spain, when it was ravaging Europe, first world countries. They ended Ebola on the African continent, in West Africa, when the first world so-called was afraid to go and help our people. This brigade continues to do its work. It's made of Cuban medical professionals. Comrade Ambassador, on behalf of our Congress.
Cuban people, lovely people, here we are, far from home. We shall love you, we shall need you for the things you've done for us. Cuban people, lovely people, here we are, far from home. We shall need you, we shall love you for the things you have done for us. How the Cuban people, the lovely people, we shall need you, We shall need of you for the things you've done for us. Hasta la victoria siempre venceremos.
Amandla. I just want to say thank you and to ratify that everything that we're doing in Cuba, in solidarity and international work, is only because of one thing, because of the socialism, because we're building socialism. So on behalf of the Cuban government, of the Cuban people, and all the doctors that they gave their life for the life of the other, thank you very much. Mando.
Thank you, Comrade. What happened? Oh, I didn't press it. I forgot to do. Okay. Thank you, Comrade. I'm now presenting this declaration on behalf of the 15th Congress of the South African Communist Party. But I just want to put a disclaimer. We haven't done it to the end. We are presenting to you the thrust of what the declaration is going to be about. There might be some minor edits on it. But we are saying that we, the 400 voting delegates representing approximately 340,000 members of the SACP, as well as members of the Young Communist League of South Africa across the country, met from 13 to 16 July 2022 in Boksburg, constituting the 15th National Congress of the party under the theme, Together, Let Us Build Powerful Socialist Movement of the Workers and the Poor. Attending the SACP 15th National Congress were our alliance partners, the ANC and COSATU, and formations of mass democratic movement, as well as other fraternal organizations and distinguished guests of our country. Also in attendance were representatives of the international fraternal formations and members of the diplomatic community from all continents of the world. Our successful Congress occurs as we complete Communist Party's 100 years of unbroken struggle to advance, defend the national democratic revolution and achieve socialism in this country. It has been 100 years of communist struggle, of educating, organizing, mobilizing the working class at the workplace and in communities against a system that put people before profit, earth before private accumulation solidarity, before extreme income and wealth inequalities. It is a system that breeds crisis levels of mass poverty, high unemployment, racial and gender division. And that system is capitalism. Our Congress occurred against the background of nearly 30 years since the dawn of democratic South Africa in April 1994, which marked the end of the decade of white minority and 300 years of colonialism in this country, and opened the prospects of radical new phase of South Africa's struggle for national democratic revolution and socialism. Many political and social gains have been achieved by the working class, by the working class majority over the last 30 years, but also many lost opportunities for deepening a radical structural economic transformation in favor of the workers and the poor. The country's economy remains a monopoly capitalist-dominated, possessing its colonial and apartheid legacy features, deepening its crisis levels of inequality, unemployment, and poverty. Consequently, the major aspects of the lives of the working class are in a crisis, hitting the working class women and youth the hardest, as the income of the workers and the poor sharply decline due to rising prices of everything we buy, as millions live in poverty and are food insecure. In providing a sober assessment on the current state of our revolution, Congress concluded that the momentum of communist struggle with our allies for national democratic revolution with a socialist vision have stalled in many fronts and in other respects reversed. Our national democratic revolution continues to be threatened by the very things it seems to overcome. The continued monopoly capitalist domination of the economy, possessing its colonial and apartheid legacy features, an economy that is inherently incapable, but rather daily reproducing and deepening crisis levels of inequality, unemployment, and poverty, with all their social ramifications, all which are strongly racialized and gendered. In short, it continues to be threatened by the filtration within our own movement and parts of the state, with neoliberal economic ideas and policies that perpetuate the monopoly capitalist-dominated economy. The predominance of the financial monopoly capital, which in dominant interest of financial monopoly capital, undermines our ability to effectively advance key programs for radical change, such as reindustrialization or major infrastructure build program or universal basic income grant or national health insurance, the NHR, or funding of students in higher education, upon which there is nonetheless wide agreement. The loss of momentum in our collective struggle for structural, social, and economic transformation also reflect that reality of the present balance of class and social forces, which have changed unfavorably for the working class and the broader majority of South Africans. Our class-orientated and militant trade union movement is generally weaker now than 30 years ago, and the prospect of renewal of the head of the movement for national liberation and securing electoral majority support remain uncertain. The working class or the proletarian communities, mainly in urban townships and informal settlement, as well as informal Bantustans, are torn apart by the daily struggles for survival and are increasingly becoming disillusioned with electoral politics. The critical capacity and confidence in the public sector institutions to drive meaningful development programs have been seriously eroded by years of plunder and corruption and neoliberal fiscal austerity measures. The SSCP rejects the call for social compact, whose basis is to co-opt the working class to advance neoliberal policy reforms originating from the IMF, the World Bank, the OECD, imperialist credit rating agencies, and other supranational bodies controlled by the US-led imperialist forces. From our analysis, the call for such social compact excludes the crucial imperative of a change in a macroeconomic policy content and direction. For past 26 years since government imposed GEAR, the SSCP and other militant working class formations have been calling for change in macroeconomic framework. We are calling for a fundamental change in economic policy, including macroeconomic policy, including a macroeconomic policy. Such change must discard neoliberalism in economic and social policy space. For without such a change, the masses of our people will continue to be devastated by high levels of unemployment, poverty, inequality, the crisis of social reproduction, and will not turn the tide against deindustrialization. We are saying no to current dogmatic, widely discredited drive to key developmental programs such as universal basic income and massive state-led infrastructure program. We say no to fiscal austerity measures pushed by National Treasury, which has meant massive budget cuts, spending on public services and goods, plunging a social crisis in working class communities and affecting the working class women mostly. Working with a range of progressive policy NGOs and others, the SACP will play an active role in opening macroeconomic policy debate and mobilizing and educating the working class communities. We say no to hyper-financialization of the economy, which has meant a huge shift of the country's financial resources away from productive economic and social investment to speculative investments in the stock exchange for quick money. These financial resources include trillions of rand of pension funds, retirement funds, and other financial assets held by the banks. It is time for these resources to work for the poor and not for the tiny rich minority. This is one major reason why the government, with mobilized working class and public support, needs to enforce prescribed assets and investments on the financial sector through legislation. This means that part of their investment need to be in designated areas of critical public developmental importance. It could be in support of just transition, for instance, or critical social infrastructure. For example, suitable located low-cost housing, including social housing and rental stock, or for major reindustrialization. Congress deliberated and resolved to the need to consolidate and provide appropriate funding and effective developmental funding, mandating of existing publicly owned banks and public financial institutions, the DBSA, the IDC, the Land Bank, and the PIC, Post Bank, and a number of provincial financial entities that are or should be publicly owned, for example, Itala Bank. This includes the need for clearer mandating of South African Reserve Bank to support public-owned banks and financial institutions. To advance the socio-economic and political objective, Congress resolved to build powerful socialist movement of the workers and the poor with the key objective of rebuilding the broad class of the working class, including the millions of marginalized, what we might call the poor or the precariat as the key motive force for ongoing radical and national democratic revolution. Under these conditions, the call for social impact will be significantly weighted against the interests of the workers and the poor majority. It will be a social compact in which the prevailing neoliberal macroeconomic policy framework will be off limits and non-negotiable. It is against this background that Congress has adopted the South African Struggle for Socialism program together with resolutions which advances the specific political, socio-economic, and organizational interventions that need to be undertaken. We are reaffirming our strategic commitment to South African struggle for national democratic revolution and socialism, which form the basis of our program for the next 5 years. Immediate key priorities of our program in the face of catastrophic and unsustainable reality confronting the majority of the South Africans, and around which we need priorities to prioritize mobilization of workers and the poor, include the rebuilding of powerful trade unions. South Africa affirms its support for democratic worker-controlled trade unions. We will work in support of building unity in action across unions and across federations. Our divisions and fragmentations play into the hands of the capitalist exploiters. The party says, let us build worker power at the workplace for adequate resourcing of labor inspectorates so that hard-won legislative victories doesn't exist on paper. The party says, let us fight outsourcing in the public and private sector. Let us fight labor brokering and build unity of workers in formal and informal sectors. The party says, let us organize cooperation of workers through establishment of trade union-based cooperatives in banking, housing, and others that service trade union members. Other services that service trade union members. The other area is building working class and popular power in our proletariat communities. This historic site of militant class struggle have been ravaged by capitalist neoliberal austerities over the past 3 decades. A working class that has to battle daily for basic survival is not a working class that is capable of leading and sustaining a radical national democratic revolution. For this reason, the Congress resolved to work with our working class communities and others to, 1, struggle for universal basic income grant that lifts working class households out of absolute poverty, that build capacity of the working class to become collective agents of change. Struggle for the right to work for all, beginning with the massive expansion of public employment programs, where the work is not just temporary, but ongoing, where we care for infrastructure that makes our communities cleaner and safer places to live, where collective work rebuilds social cohesion and overcomes the huge despair and sense of alienation amongst millions of unemployed youth, where public employment work addresses the crisis of social reproduction, which particularly have crushing impact on women. Let us massively expand public employment in the caring economy, in early childhood learning, in provision of collective food gardens, food kitchens, in sustaining places of safety for women and children. Strengthen networks of community-based cooperatives, including organizing community-owned stores and community-owned banking institutions, including stockfairs and barrier societies. Ensure active working class involvement in many institutions of participatory democracy, such as community policing, neighborhood watch, and street committees. Rebuild trade unions, locals in our communities as key points of focus from which to help coordinate popular activism and rebuild workplace community unity. Support government efforts directed at township and village economy at the district development model, ensuring that these programs impact on the lives of the working class and the poor, and not just on new emerging local elites. For several years after the passing of historical constitution in 1996, the program for radical land reform was delayed and slowed down by lack of urgency on the part of the movement, who were caught flat-footed, wallowing under the pretext of non-existent so-called willing seller, willing buyer in the constitution. This was exacerbated by failure to even pass a law that was to enable government to expropriate land without compensation for the purpose of redressing the past as guided by the constitution, only to wake up 20 years after the start of a fruitless process of trying to amend Section 25 as a counter to demagogues' revolutionarily appealing postures, when we have wasted an opportunity of a 5-year term in a majority in Parliament. We say as the Congress that these are the hit and miss that we need to avoid in order to achieve the meaningful acceleration of land transformation. We need radical reform for urban transformation, where 70% of South Africans now live, and for rural transformation. The working class and the poor remain largely confined in peripheral townships and informal settlements that were designed as dormitory locations for reproduction of cheap, daily migrating labor. Apartheid legislation has been removed, but now the financialized property market acts with equal brutality, enforcing the majority of workers and the poor to live on the margins in poverty traps, far away from resources, amenities, and recreational facilities. While we seek, therefore, to transform the reality within these townships and informal settlement, we must equally transform the overall spatial design of our towns and cities. Let us campaign for a different countryside. Land reform in our rural areas must be guided by the Freedom Charter's call for land to be shared among those who work it. The priority of rural land reform must be directed to the 1/3 of South Africa's population still living in the former Bantustans. Overwhelmingly, they are women eking out a disparate subsistence, often as marginalized subjects of patriarchal chieftaincies, and not as full South African citizens in their own sense and in their own right. The party resolved to campaign for land reform that include providing infrastructure, water rights, agricultural extension officers, and veterinary services to the most marginalized. Want to campaign for security of tenure for small and subsistence farmers, giving full recognition for variety of tenure forms, including communal and tenure rights. Want to halt ongoing and illegal evictions of farm workers and their families from farms. Especially halt the continued evictions of labor tenants and their families from farms on which they have lived and worked over many generations. These evictions are nothing less than an ongoing colonial exploitation. We say expropriate the expropriators, and without compensation, return the former labor tenants as the rightful owners to what are in reality their own farms. One of the SSCP's most successful mass campaign in post-1994 was our Red October campaign, especially the financial sector campaign. We launched it in 2000 and successfully mobilized over 50 other formations. The campaigns culminated in financial sector summit convened by government. The most important advances that we achieved were those related to consumer issues, issues that immediately impacted on the working class and the precarious middle strata, much better transparency and regulation of blacklisting by credit bureaus, access to banking facilities, the regulations of loan sharks, machinistas, and the highlighting of reckless and unregulated repossession of homes by banks. We also succeeded in driving the passing of legislation on cooperative banking through this campaign. The time has come to massively revitalize the financial sector campaign. But this time, while mobilizing on the basis of financial consumer issues, debt relief against repossessions, against the high transactional cost of charged by the banking oligopolies. We must also be more militant. We must also more militantly address the larger structural issues. The SACP, together with its allies, will campaign to halt massive legal and illegal outflows of capital from South Africa. The South African Revenue Services, the South African Reserve Bank, and others must up their game. The continued erosion of exchange controls must be reversed. We'll campaign for the enforcement of prescribed assets requirement on the banks and financial institutions. A significant proportion of their investment must go to economic and social infrastructure and not to speculative assets. We'll campaign for consolidation of strong developmental public banking and financial institutions, and for South African Reserve Bank to actively support them. Campaign for vibrant cooperative banking network. Let us struggle to achieve the Freedom Charter's vision of the state banking sector, the common property of all. In the international arena, it has become crucial for party, together with allies on the left, to develop a correct understanding of the current contradictions and realignments taking place within the global political and economic order. The roots of the current NATO-Ukraine-Russia crisis can be traced back to 1997, to the vacuum left by disintegration of the Soviet Union in the years before, after which the US and its Western allies began with several efforts to impose a new so-called rules-based order to protect and advance its imperialist interests. In its economic form, Western hegemonic interests were pursued through the imposition of neoliberal global trade and finance policies, which began in the late 1970s, then accelerated by the US through the WTO, IMF, and the World Bank in the following decades. In its political-military reform, Western imperialist interests were pursued by the US directly and via NATO through several major wars of aggression in Iraq, Syria, Yemen, and currently via a proxy war in Ukraine. Whilst rapidly expanding its military alliance, NATO to contain and isolate and weaken and destroy any perceived rivals. This Congress resolves to reiterate support for the Cuban people in their struggle to force the imperialist United States regime to lift its unilateral and illegal blockade and calls upon the United Nations General Assembly in its 77 sessions to make its voice louder over again by voting once again for the lifting of the blockade. Our campaign should include mobilizing our workers and communities and raise awareness of the achievements and the challenges of the Cuban Revolution. Furthermore, Congress strongly rejects the political media campaigns and subversive actions that are deployed today, in addition, through digital social networks to manipulate the Cuban reality, promoting, on one hand, violence and internal destabilization, and on the other hand, discredit Cuba that justifies an external intervention. That's, I think. Congress resolved to strengthen SACP to play its role as a vanguard party of the working class for socialism in this extremely challenging national global context. Over the years, our party has grown in membership strength and has built and continued to build layers of SACP cadre to carry out its historic mission. Over the next 5 years, we'll continue to build and strengthen independent voice of the party, build organizational capacity to play an active role in working class and popular communities. It needs to consolidate a revolutionary cadre capable of carrying forward this task at all levels of our formation, and it needs to be able to resource these activities materially. These are the tasks this Congress must carry forward. Let us build and strengthen the party of Chris Hani, Joe Slovo, and many militant communists. Together, let us build a powerful socialist movement of the workers and the poor. Socialism is the future. Thank you, Comrade.
Alex, I hope you are picking up the typos as he was reading, because I was also picking up, but I wasn't sorting them out. Amanda! Thank you very much. Sorry. Okay. Thank you very much, Comrade First Deputy General Secretary, Comrade Madala, for taking us through our declaration. Comrades, here is the declaration as has been read for consideration and adoption by Congress. Can I see, I think that the first board I saw is Gauteng, followed by Eastern Cape and YCL. Gauteng.
Thank you, Chair. As Gauteng, we want to support the declaration, but with some additions. Cuba is covered, and would like to add Polisario Front, our support for Polisario's front struggle against the colonization by Morocco. So we support the self-determination of the Sahrawis against that colonization. And the second one that we'd like to see is Palestine, our continued support for Palestine. And lastly, our support for the struggle against the illegal sanctions that have been meted against Venezuela. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That was Gauteng arguing for incorporation of the solidarity and support for the Sahrawi people, Palestine, Venezuela. You got everything, our drafters. Thank you very much. Who was next? Eastern Cape. Comrade Mkhach.
Thanks, Comrade Chair. Congratulations to yourselves as the leadership of the party. I'm alone here, I'm the Eastern Cape.
Black man, you are on your own.
Yes, Chairperson. Chair, welcome the declaration. We noted a lot of editing that must take place. It's rather too long, maybe in the process of editing, attempt to shorten it so that it's attractive to the ordinary members on the ground. Otherwise, we welcome the general trust of the declaration. Chair, there are few additions that one would like to make. One is a very critical resolution that we have adopted in this conference in relation to the closure of Israel embassy. We adopted that resolution in this conference, and it cannot be omitted. As far. The second one is in relation to our reiteration to the state power resolution. We adopted and reiterated, and I don't have to rehash the context and the spirit of our discussion. Safe to say, we instructed, this Congress instructed the Central Committee to develop a roadmap that must be presented to the oncoming Central Committee in December and be finalized in that augmented Central Committee. Thirdly, this resolution, very important resolution, be popularized by the Central Committee in all platforms in society as we prepare for implementation of this particular resolution. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you very much, Comrade Mkhacha. I think that the proposals for additions are made, and Comrade Mkhacha is highlighting maybe the need to shorten the declaration. Okay, thank you. YCL? Ufasimp.
Thank you very much, Chair. Again, my name is Dibulelo Mahladzi from the Young Communist League. Slalo, we've got a few things that we want to add, taking into cognizance the fact that a declaration will not include everything, but speaks to key issues. But the youth of South Africa will be very unhappy if a declaration of the party will not take cognizance of the youth unemployment in the country. Secondly, there was a very strong argument around the energy issue, the renewable energy, and it does not feature anywhere in the declaration. We therefore request that it be affirmed. State power issue, I think Eastern Cape has covered us there. The very last one is that we've got two special declarations on local government and ESCOT. They are also equally not featured there. On section 25, on the amendment of the land question, we are proposing that, as per the resolution of the commission, much as the process of amending section 25 has collapsed, a clear resolution was that we ought to test the constitution in as far as the land question is concerned. And therefore, it must not be left as it is, as if the process has collapsed, therefore there's no alternative. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thanks, Comrade Tibulelo. There was the amendments that are being proposed. Yeah, I'm being assured that they are actually being captured here. Limpopo, followed by Northwest and Free State.
Thank you, Chairperson. In celebration and support of the declaration, we want to echo the same words as echoed by the first speaker, who proposed that the declaration must still be subjected to further clinical cleansing so that it can be shortened to avoid a number of tautology which is there. But also, Chairperson, this declaration must be geared towards its primary target of primary consumers, who are the working class and the poor. In other words, for instance, amongst us even here, if I may ask what OECD means, some may not even know. So we are saying,
You listening, OECD? Sorry, comrade, to disturb you.
yes,
Yeah, Kubakom, sorry.
we are saying it should be tailored to its primary consumers or target, which are the working class and the poor, most of whom are semi-illiterate, so that they can consume and pass over the information to the general membership and general public. But the last point will also be that in the cleansing process, they should also go on to look at its factuality and veracity test. For example, where we say all continents of the world were here. Thanks, Chair, but the rest I'm covered.
Okay, thank you very much. Limpopo, Northwest. Moses Kotane.
Thank you very much, Comrade Chairperson, Comrade National Chair of the 15th Central Committee National Congress. Hello, National Chair.
Yebo.
Yes,
Pramatota.
Yes, National Chair. Now, National Chair, the first Deputy General Secretary, when presenting, he said it's a broad trust. Now, Gauteng will know English better. He said it's a broad trust. He said it's a broad trust. Our assumption as a province is that there are issues that may not necessarily be in a declaration, but when they are raised as additions, they could still be covered on resolutions when the resolutions are finalized by the Central Committee for final release. So some of the issues may not necessarily be in the resolution. That's why we wanted to accept that explanation of broad trust. But where we agree with YCL and Limpopo, it's on the issue of that the declaration must speak locally to the current socio-economic challenges facing our people. At least let's find a way that we speak in Congress, but that has a resemblance of the day-to-day challenges they are facing today and where we are with them in that regard. The last issue before we propose that it be adopted, National Chair, is that as there's a resolution and a decision to again have the state power, in this instance, contestation of elections, having to be done in a roadmap. It would also be better that we don't use together, let's build a powerful socialist movement of workers and the poor as a slogan or a theme. We should action it so that, remember, it changes the previous resolution of popular power and left front. So it must become an inherent program that would be added either in SARS or in any other document after this, so that we then speak a common language as provinces and all the structures of the SACP, so that we don't use that as a basis to shift from a popular left front, socialist front. So with those viewers, National Chair, we think that the declaration could be adopted with the amendments. Thank you.
Okay, you are moving, eh?
Yes,
Comrade
National
Madoda.
Chair, yes.
Okay, thank you very much, Comrade Madoda. In addition to his input, is also formally moving on behalf of Moses Kotane that we actually adopt the resolution with the amendments. Hak Freystad. They've left to vote. Hak Freystad, Comrade Mjalef.
Thanks, Chair. The Free State has also left me and the Chair to deposit this one issue. Chair, we welcome the draft as prepared by the team, the drafting team. But I think we thought YCL will deposit this matter. It's important, especially in the early phases of the draft. Looking into the 2003 investment of the YCL, which has started to bear the fruits in this Congress, in the Secretariat
Are we
there.
supposed to wear this?
That investment has to be appreciated in the form of the centenary of the YCL cannot be omitted in that declaration. I think it is important that our declaration recognizes fully that we are meeting at the year and the time when the Young Communist League, which is just 1 year younger than its parent in this context. But I think the other issue that I wanted to comment is a small matter which I suspect the cleansing process will deal with. I think the second or the third paragraph, it speaks about things, which I think it is important that we become particular that all what the National Democratic Revolution stands against, it is not necessarily things, but we become particular on what is that. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Nopala. There was, KZN. Moses Mapita. As you go out to vote, I'm seeing your flag. No, pay to Vaseline, method. No voter.
Thanks, Chairperson. Just a few additions. I think the declaration must also capture the crisis of social reproduction which our communities are facing.
Sorry, KZN. Comrades, can we try and be quiet as we move out so that we don't disturb the speakers? Continue.
Yes, Chair. I was saying, I think the declaration must also capture the crisis of social reproduction which our communities are facing right now. Like maybe if you can speak about the rising prices of food. I think it's food prices, the rising of food prices, yes, and the issue of rising prices of petrol as well. All those things that our communities are facing, Comrade Chairperson, and also to capture the issue of environmental degradation. Because I'm also coming from KZN, we have been facing floods and all that. I think that must also be captured with declaration. Thank you, Comrade Chair.
Okay. Thank you very much. The crisis of social reproduction, the rise in cost of living, because I'm monitoring you, by the way, as I'm listening, whether you are chatting to yourselves or you are taking notes, as well as the issue of the environment linked to disasters and floods. Which was the next, that was the last one, KZN. Oh, Gauteng, is that not a second bite?
No, we forgot one thing. In the Cuba resolution, on that part of Cuba, we don't mention anything about the occupation of Cuban land at Guantanamo Bay, because the two demands of Cuba, which we are supporting, is the end to the illegal, immoral blockade on Cuba and the withdrawal of the USA from Cuban soil in Guantanamo Bay.
Thanks, Comrade Hope. That concludes the speakers from the floor. Comrade First Deputy General Secretary, I don't know whether you want to respond by way of closing this item. Ngiyazama maqabane niyabona.
No, thanks, Comrade. I think plenary was giving us areas as we edit the declaration for the last time to consider, and there are many pertinent ones that are really supposed to come in. Safe to say, Moses Mabida, that the one on the sexual reproduction is there, and we mentioned the things that we're raising on food pricing. But I think I like the one that we're talking about on the environment, because it means that we must also reflect on the devastating situation around the floods and the disasters of flood within the Eastern Cape and KZN. I think all of them, Slalo, they were just issues for consideration.
Thank you very much, comrades. Moses Kotane had formally moved for the adoption of the declaration with the various amendments that has been suggested to be taken into account, including shortening, and also including the idea that perhaps the declaration can't capture everything. YCL. I thought that I was closing the issue now.
No, Chair, we are seconding.
Oh, you are seconding?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes, Ufa Simba. Free State, you are supporting. Okay. Thank you very much then, comrades. Let's give ourselves a huge round of applause for having successfully adopted the declaration with the amendments, which means indeed we now have got proof that we did hold the 15th National Congress of the South African Communist Party. Comrades, I know that comrades are being called out in groups to go and vote. But now we've reached that most important part of our Congress, where our brand new General Secretary, Comrade Soli Africa Mapaila, is going to give us his maiden address to this Congress by way of the closing speech to this particular Congress. Nopala, I hope that you are ready. We are ready for you. We are all ears. Ithini le ngoma beniyicula ngezwe nivuka nawumoya wesonto. Yes, asimsukumisa uNobhala. What is this? You don't want to wear one.
Oh, yeah.
I think that it sends a message, you know.
Where is Comrade Basam? Aungshay ngayo basam. Put it for me proper, my brother. I want to address very this one of the Palestinians. The way you do it proper.
Indlela baba indlela ifuna leyo ifuna
Amandla.
abalungileyo
Amandla.
wethu
Matla. All power. Forward to socialism, forward. Down with capitalism, down. Long live the alliance, long live. Long live the alliance, long live. Thank you very much, comrades. Comrade National Chairperson, Comrade Blade in Zimande, officials of the SACP newly elected, National Treasurer Comrade Joyce Muloi Moropa, First DGS Comrade Madala Masuku, Second DGS Comrade David Masondo, and our Deputy National Chairperson Comrade Tulas Ngesi. In anticipation to greet, to be announced 15 Congress members of the Central Committee. Representatives of our alliance partners, the ANC, COSATU. I've seen the fellow fighter stayed with us, Mike Chingange. We know fellow fighter to stay with the Revolutionary Working Class Party to the end. It's a difficult task. We appreciate that. I've also seen from the trade union movement, Comrade Makwaiba, our erstwhile president of the World Federation of Trade Unions, who also was attending this in his own right as a member of the Central Committee of our party. And I want to thank him for his service to international working class and workers, Comrade Makwaiba, and thank his union, Nahau, and our federation, COSATU. Delegates of our Congress and our Young Communist League of South Africa, led by Comrade Tinyiko Ntini and Mabuse Mpe. I must indicate, Nopara, that my Congress delegate came from the Young Communist League. I have expressed this to one comrade that you are the real Congress delegate. Most dynamic section of the Congress. Our esteemed international delegates, our comrades from Venezuela, in particular from PSUV, I see your delegation is still complete. Our delegation from the USA, from Palestine, our ambassador from the DPRK is still here. Much appreciated, Ambassador. the ambassador of Cuba and his delegation, as well as the ambassador of Venezuela. They are all here. Much appreciated. You were allowed to freely leave. But thank you for staying through. The ambassador of Vietnam, still here. And many other international delegations that are here. I must also say and express our profound apologies to the Communist Party of Swaziland that was not able to give a message of support from the podium during the international session. It was an oversight, not any other thing. We'll find time, Comrade Kenny, the General Secretary, for further engagements with the party and also to participate in our public platforms. Our local guests, Austin Pohani, thank you for staying through. I had thought this time, today, you were here last night, right up to the end. You are still here again. Much thank you. I also want to thank my wife for attending to hear me speak for the first time in a rally or a congress after an election process. Thank you very much. Much appreciated. And my boy is also here. He said, no, Dad, I'm coming today. When he was born, I named him Lening. Yes, his mother said, but what if later on he sells out this distinguished revolutionary and become a capitalist? How will we live with that? And we decided to reverse that name on registration of his certificate, just so that we should not carry the load of the betrayal of V.I. Lenin. Let me also, comrades, as I greet even the media practitioners, those that have stayed with us. We know our Congress has taken more than you budgeted time for. Greet a few number of people for various reasons. Because ideally, I belong to a group of young people that believe that in the execution of our revolutionary struggle, we lived very tough and very rough. And we had a motto that our blood will nourish the tree of freedom. And we confronted the enemy head on. And for this to happen, I struggled with a number of comrades, some of whom have remained personal friends and comrades. This platform is a political platform, but I want to acknowledge them because in many respects, have they not taken certain actions, I will not be alive to be addressing this Congress. First is to acknowledge the People's Commander of Umkhonto weSizwe, Commander Chechela Machite, who was our commander. And his compatriot and our comrade, Themba Qaba, we called him Oros Mafuta, his combat name. He's not here, was unable to come. And the late comrade Mjalefa Mahlasela. This was the unit that carried us and commanded us, our various units. Amongst those, we have a few members here I want to acknowledge. Comrade Mahlomula Mabote, who we served in the ranks of Umkhonto weSizwe as well together. And Comrade Eddie Sabi, Comrade Mbongeni Khatebe. We survived the great onslaught of the apartheid regime from the Youth Congress. In between, there are others, but I'm just mentioning these few. Of course, there's an old lady that protected me before I left the country. There were several others, that some have passed on, but Major who still alive. I want to acknowledge her because most of you will not know me, because when I left my family house, she provided me with accommodation. Then we conducted our activities from a site organized by our commanders, Commander Chechela and others. Deeply appreciated, Commander. The last group of people I need to acknowledge is a team that put me, led by Commander Oros. Now, this is the team that connected me with the Communist Party. We belong to an underground party unit in the East End. Several others have passed on, but Comrade Oros is still alive. He was the head of that unit, with Comrade Obet Khatebe, who's still alive, Comrade Malombo Skwambani, who's still alive, Comrade Sam Situ, who passed on, Comrade Luvuyo from Fosloras, who passed on, Comrade Matirano Mabena, who passed on recently because of COVID-19. This was my first contact with the Communist Party as a Communist Party under that unit. And thereafter I worked with several other people, but that was the core unit. So I want to acknowledge them. Had it not been that process, I would have just been a nationalist without class consciousness and not committed to the struggle of the working class and towards socialism. Therefore, I felt it was important to divert a bit from protocol Nopala to accept these people, to acknowledge them. There's a teacher that when everyone gave up on me, he said to others, "No, he looks too young, I can handle him. Leave him to me." I would not even have been allowed to continue schooling. That's Menier at that time, we called them this way, Menier Roni Murat Setla. I want to acknowledge and thank him. He's a priest and was never a communist. But we have continued engaging with him, particularly given his contribution to me and my own development. Comrades, early this morning when we arrived at this Congress, we received the sad news that the great Cuban revolutionary, Comrade Jose Ramon Balaguer Cabrera, has passed on. This was one of Cuba's most outstanding revolutionaries. One of those who participated with Comrade Fidel in the Sierra Maestra. One of those that before Fidel gave up his powers after he got ill, was one of the few comrades, 6 of them, that he shared executive authority to run the Cuban Revolution. And this comrade led the Communist Party of Cuba and was head of its international relations. In that field, he coordinated many international forces in the socialist and communist struggles, in the national liberation movement. In fact, when you go to Havana and you go to the headquarters of the CPC, the Communist Party of Cuba, he's the one to receive you for special delegations like ours. No pala. Coming out from there, when we used to run because we would have exceeded our time allocation, because he loved engaging and was one of the sharpest Marxist intellectuals. He has passed on. We'll appreciate if this Congress can express its sincere sense of great loss to his family, to the Cuban people and the Cuban government, and the world working class for the loss that we have encountered. And please stand up and give him a moment of silence in recognition of his heroism to the struggle of the people and for socialism. Amandla. Thank you very much. Comrade, I would like also to congratulate the newly elected members of the 15th National Congress Central Committee to be announced. And I wish that the next 5 years will work collectively until the end of our tenure in July 2027. But as I acknowledge this team, I want to pay a special tribute to our outgoing General Secretary, Comrade Blade Nzimande, for the sterling work he did over the last 2 decades plus leading our Communist Party. It has never and will never be easy to lead a Communist Party in a capitalist economy. Bourgeois ideology is dominant, arrogant. Socialist ideas are looked upon with disdain and condemned. But he stood up and raised the banner of the socialist movement. When I went to do my work in the SACP on international work, at the time, he was the national deputy chairperson of the Communist Party, but equally the acting national chair, because Subabu Raymond Mhlaba was now deployed as the High Commissioner to Uganda. And we started working well from that time. And Comrade Langa Zita was our national organizer. And I must also congratulate and thank him for his own contribution, Comrade Zita, to my development as the organizer of our Communist Party. Opu Gambu. Thank you, Gambu. Gambu gave me very difficult party missions. I had known the party from the underground point of view, but we began to organize and work to organize the working class, the workers in the mines. And when we thought we could do it, and we later on had the 10th Congress of the Communist Party, Comrade Blade Nzimande was elected General Secretary. Together with Comrade Jeremy Cronin, we presented to them an idea about expansion of the organizing division beyond theoretical component of organizing. It is in this regard that the Communist Party roped me in, first to organize for its elections, as well as doing some organizing work. And I worked under Comrade Blade in Nzimande. It has been a political relationship that lasted more than 2.5 decades. A strong bond. And I want to thank him for his massive contribution to the growth of the Communist Party. After the 10th Congress, we had less than 10,000 members. That was 1998. At that time, the class project had adopted gear. And we had to confront a massive campaign to defend the workers against privatization. This matter itself caused tensions in the Communist Party. It's a matter that the Communist Party must have the ability to turn around, reunify itself, because during that period, we lost many people with great history and tradition of the Communist Party. And they were embraced by narrow nationalists and sometimes even used against the Communist Party. We worked to rebuild the Communist Party together with Comrade Blade into a campaigning organization. And we intensified political education within the trade union movement. We traversed the length and breadth of the country to organize workers. From that period onwards, we launched massive campaigns. That is why we can claim, without any fear of contradiction, that there's never been any other political party in this country that took up working class campaign than the South African Communist Party. We took up the financial sector campaign to unburden our people from the throttlehood of the credit bureaus. We launched the land campaign. Out of that campaign against the credit bureaus, we then began to confront clearly finance monopoly capital, which today has grown and has become dominant in our economy. It's financialized in all other sectors of our economy. Through those campaigns, our bonds grew stronger. And Comrade Blade would allow me the confidence to put plans and to execute our plans. This was the basis upon which we defended strategic working class struggles in this country. When he left for government in 2009, together with Comrade Jeremy Cronin, he still had the confidence to leave me in the office to run the daily affairs of the Communist Party. I want to thank you for the experience, National Chairperson, Comrade Blade, for those efforts. I must also take this opportunity to thank, at that time, a member who was a trade unionist. We used to just call him the shop steward. Our former national chairman, Comrade Senzeni Zokwana, who made it possible for the Communist Party to embed itself amongst the mine workers and to reconnect with the struggles of J.B. Marx. Our chairman, who was mandated by the Communist Party to establish the Black Mine Workers Union, now called the NUM. We worked together with Comrade Zokwana. We visited all the mines, almost all the mines of South Africa. I know all of them. In some instances, I slept in them, those mines. The diamond mines, the gold mines, the coal mines. After that, I said to Nzimande, you need also to go underground and see the conditions of the mine workers. You talk about them in public, but you never have gone down there to feel what conditions they work under. Kolobe, we went to Mamabolo, went to Carltonville. One day with Comrade Blade. And we had a delegation from China, from the CPC. We went deep in the mine. After he has visited the mine, he never wanted us to even take some of the delegations to underground. When we took this Chinese delegation, he had objected, but the mine system works differently. By the time he had objected, we were already in the cage, that takes you down. So we got the message later on when he came back midday. Because you don't just go in there like a lift and think you can come back in the next hour. Those things are differently regulated. Palwe NUM was here. We can explain that better to you. We used to go and experiment the working conditions of the workers and develop a plan out of it. That's the same way that we also developed a plan for farm workers. When we launched our campaign, focusing on what we characterize as the rightless workers in the new South Africa, the farm workers, is because we had visited Tarleton in the farms to do work with General Secretary, that time, Blade Nzimande. Then we were able to develop concrete plans on the basis of the working conditions of the workers. So I want to thank you, Nopala, for this massive contribution, and to thank Comrade Zokwana for embedding us in the organic industrial workers, the mine workers, and facilitated all those possibilities to visit the mines, working together with Comrade Gwede Mantashe, who was already at the time a member of our Politburo. Comrades, we convened as the 15th Congress of the SACP, guided by the theme Together, Building a Powerful Socialist Movement of the Workers and the Poor. To concretize this theme as our direct outcome of this historic party congress, will indeed contribute in no small measure to our struggle to take forward our party's overall guiding slogan of building socialism now, or socialism is the future, build it now. We have convened at a time when our country is facing serious difficulties. Our country has been blacked out completely by self-created insufficient electricity power generation and capacity problems, unreliable power stations that experience frequent breakdowns. And this electricity crisis has not ended and doesn't indicate to end soon. We leave this Congress when our country will still remain in the midst of rolling load shedding programs. which has actually become an avenue of accumulation at the expense of the country, and especially the working class. We need to reflect on how this situation was allowed to happen. But overall, we need to find solutions for our current crisis. There are, of course, easy solutions, which political decisions need to be made by government. Some of these easy solutions, for instance, is to mitigate this unending blackouts by procuring oil from friendly countries, for instance, rather than from existing framework created by imperialist Europe and the USA. We could procure oil from Venezuela, for instance. We'll get it cheaper, we can guarantee you that. The Venezuelans had actually given us an oil field in honor of President Nelson Mandela that they want us to exploit. We are not interested in that because that will disrupt existing oil industry in this country. We have seen, for instance, the rand-ruble exchange that is quite favorable to our conditions. We can procure oil directly from Russia, much cheaper. Because I think 1 rand or 1 ruble is about 3 rands, as opposed to 1 rand to $15, $16. So we can procure cheaper. These options should remain available for our country, should not be prohibited by imperialist countries. We need to regain our independence and national sovereignty as a country. And therefore, as we confront all these difficult challenges facing the working class in our country, we are also considerate of the fact that our revolution is at a critical point of being lost. We are about to face a major setback. Our people have been mercilessly killed unabated. They have been massacred, literally, let alone from an economic exploitation. This phenomena of various murders taking place in our country must be addressed too. This doesn't bode well for our revolution. That is why one of the tasks of our youth in particular is to be at the forefront to defend the country, at the forefront to fight crime in our communities. Fighting crime is not a less important task. Communities must learn to reorganize themselves and all participate, because accepting the value of labor as communists, it's important, because each component of labor contributes to the totality of the well-being of all of us. Despite all these difficulties that we are faced with, challenges facing the NDR and the struggle for socialism, our movement is busy devouring itself by internal fights. Let's stop this fight in the movement. We must focus, comrades, on practical issues and challenges facing the people. If one were to say we were to give the first order of this Congress, is the order to rescue the National Democratic Revolution and its leading component, the African National Congress. is the order again to strengthen the South African Communist Party and to unite it so that it can play that critical role in being the critical component of this powerful socialist movement of the workers and the poor that we seek to build. We must, in line with our declaration, call for urgent interventions in the economy. So in other words, what our declaration highlights is that we need tectonic changes in the economy if we are to ever address challenges facing the working class in this country. It should not be any ordinary changes. For this to happen, we need a leadership that can respect itself and respect the mandate that it holds on behalf of the electorate of this country. The changes that must happen, whether it's the monetary and fiscal policies, should be radical changes. The working class in this country was looking forward to the outcome of this Congress, not as a mere Congress that was held by another alliance component in the Revolutionary Alliance of the ANC and COSATU and the civic movement and our mass democratic formations. But they were looking out to a program that will quickly address their problems. As President Mandela would have said, the people cannot postpone hunger or being sick. This is the agency required by this revolutionary movement today to respond to the challenges facing our people. The capitalist system, as we are busy fighting, continues to squeeze us and to deepen exploitation of the working class. We equally need to build a strong, resilient, and dynamic revolutionary working class party that is clear about its socialist agenda. The Communist Party that we must build should not just be a Communist Party that cannot differentiate itself with the general progressive liberation movement. We are a socialist organization. Our branches, our structures must be different from the structures of the African National Congress and their articulation on issues. We cannot even seek to regurgitate ANC policies. We need to deepen socialist orientation of our ideas within the National Democratic Liberation Movement. Therefore, the socialist orientation of the Communist Party in our communities must be sharpened. To do so, we certainly have to sharpen class contradictions with capital. The reason why capital has amassed so much strength in the existence of a growing Communist Party on the one hand is precisely because we have allowed the dominant ideology of reconciliation, the basis of our alliance movement, to be the driving platform upon which we engage big capital. That posture, Maqabane, we need to nuance it or to change it radically so that capital should know it will always be confronted by the Communist Party. We confronted capital without shame. That agenda to confront capital should continue. If you were to take the last 10 of our campaigns, ask any other organization whether they have ever ran more than 10 campaigns in this country. The financial sector transformation campaign, if we have done at least 5% of what that campaign was about, we will not be talking about these inequalities that we are regurgitating every day in our speeches in this country. There should be limits. A communist party can't have unending tolerance to exploitation. That's not for the Communist Party. That is why Communist Party leaders should never think that they will be friends of capital. So therefore, we need to confront neoliberalism. Because in the midst of these economic difficulties that our people are facing, caused by international capital and the imperialist forces who are our strategic enemies, that's where the primary contradiction is. The primary contradiction is not internal, both in the party and in the ANC or in our alliance movement. That is why we need a shifting of gear to focus on the real enemy of the people. Monopoly capital. That's our strategic enemy. The neoliberals have caused this electricity crisis in our country today. And yet, they are deepening this crisis so much that the people will ultimately never believe our solutions. Because any other solution will do for the people. And they want to impose such solutions on us. We must reject the continued implementation of neoliberal economic policies, as we should continue to oppose state capture continuation in any other form. We have said neoliberalism and state capture are two sides of the same coin. What we really believe is happening in the energy sector, it's a new form of state capture that is taking place. I can tell you, without being an engineer, this crisis, it's self-generated. We can solve it. People are not interested. But it's precisely, one delegate raised this question here about what's happening in that particular industry regarding the diesel supply for power stations under these conditions. But it's beyond that. It's the fact that we are easily giving up our national sovereignty as a country. And therefore, we must intensify our struggle against neoliberalism and call on government in the main and our alliance partners, working together with them to change the manner in which we operate, particularly regarding implementation of prescribed reforms from the IMF and the World Bank that are imposed in our country through the Treasury. And Nopala, former Nopala, we're 14th Congress. I'm still going to get used to this point. You know, at one point, for instance, we sought to prove to our alliance components that economic policy that we are driving here is given to us literally by the World Outlook reports of the IMF, the OECD, and the World Bank, without shame, implemented as such. Even just after adopting the recent manifesto, 2019, 2 months after election, a new economic policy is imposed on our country by the Treasury, by Tito Mboweni. That policy, we proved it scientifically, that it comes from the IMF and the World Bank, sometimes several pages, even not cited of their sources, as if it's organic policies. That is why, for instance, one of the points that the president raised here of the ANC yesterday regarding network economy, sectors of the economy, We don't agree. That's a fundamental area of difference with us there in economic policy discourse in this country. It's at the core of neoliberal austerity imposition in our country as imposed by the IMF, the World Bank, and OECD countries. The network industries that they talk about, they are talking about telecommunication, energy, sanitation. That's the reason when they continue to regurgitate this thing, people think it's good English. It's not good English, it's neoliberal policy discourse. That must be rejected completely, Makawan. We must register that as a fundamental point of difference with our allies, particularly the ANC and government, particularly through the Treasury, on economic policy. So that going forward, when we engage, we know where there are differences. There are major areas of agreement, for instance, that Treasury in particular has rejected to implement over the years. The issue around microeconomic policy, fiscal and monetary policy, where we have been completely ignored, both the Communist Party and COSATU. Such attitude should no longer be tolerated elastically by the Communist Party going forward. And I must say, Makaban, one comrade says to me, so in fact started by a journalist when I arrived here from the SABC, who said to me, yeah, so we hear you are taking over and soon there will be a cabinet reshuffle, you will go to government. I will not go to government. I'm elected to serve the Communist Party. By so saying, it does not mean other leaders of the Communist Party will not go to government. We will deploy leaders of the Communist Party to senior positions in government. And we will recall them if they are incompetent. That's the new form of reconfiguration of the alliance. The ANC is not going to decide for us from national to local level. Such periods are over. This, Makaban, like I said, we must focus on uniting the movement. In doing so, there are fundamentals where there should be no compromise. That's the point that must be understood by our allies to start with. And then, big capital. In the manifesto of the ANC, which represent, by the way, the lowest form of agreements of the alliance. It's a compromise. It talks about prescribed assets. We must insist on prescribed assets for our rural hinterland, for development, for our townships and villages. We must insist on that prescribed assets for the development of infrastructure in our country. If you like, climate resilient infrastructure. That must be implemented. It cannot wait for another 5 years to say it's one of those manifestos. Our manifestos should no longer be ritualistic. As we are having these discussions, comrades, we are closing our Congress, I mean to say. We must insist on opening up state sectors to play a major role in economic development. That is public economy. And this will be a major competition against neoliberal economic discourse. Because we control massive resources as the public, yet we allow the capitalist institutions to abuse these resources. Therefore, as we fight for public sector-based economic-driven interventions, we must equally intensify our fight against privatization, no matter how nice it is couched. For instance, in the ICT sector, they've just recently almost privatized our spectrum. The high radio frequency spectrum, for instance, have been given away to private capital. The working class and the poor are locked out of its control. And yet, we are talking about, to use Ngaba's conception, because he follows this bourgeois theory, he's an engineer. Fourth industrial revolution. We are deeper than that as a Communist Party in articulating this question of computation and digitalization. The ICT sector, for instance, instead of anchoring it on a major structural transformation agenda, we've just auctioned off our spectrum and gave away high radio frequency spectrum to the duopoly of Vodacom and MTN. Yesterday, we learned with deep regret that MTN is intending to take over Telkom. That's our first fight coming out of this Congress. Because we are already a majority in Telkom through various state-owned entities. Now we want to sell this thing to private sector, MTN. Who's benefiting out of this when we are taking the resources of the public to the private sector? This, Makawan, must never be accepted. That is why the same way when we fought the sale of Vodacom, which was making 1 million rand profit per second, we sold it. It continues to make more, perhaps, even after it was out of our hands. Who gives away an institution that performs that way? Because of addiction to private capital. And therefore, bribery and rewards, backdoor bribery and rewards. We must fight for the masses. And this institution, Telkom, will never be allowed to be taken over by MTN. We must reject that. How are we ever going to think that this developing sector of ICT, we're going to play a role and even facilitate the involvement of our youth in this sector when we are selling it? It is quite clear, Makaban, that there are new battles that are already drawn as we are concluding this Congress. The bourgeoisie will never respect us if we do not respect ourselves. We were passing a special resolution here about escort workers. Just a company here, Gauteng. From that resolution, you have heard clearly, Minasho, Mamabul. You have heard the instructions of this Congress. We have said you must set up party units. I'm glad that that's in my own district. And the chairperson of the district is from my branch. And Comrade Madihlava is also here, the district secretary. We must go there and set up a party unit and recruit those workers and defend their jobs. Otherwise, we must launch a nationwide campaign against escort products in this country. We are not going to enter this battle like a trade union. We are not a trade union. We are the Communist Party. We will never allow these capitalists disrespecting our workers and their rights in this form. Completely disdainful. Because the defense of the workers is apparently through the courts. That's a bourgeois conception if you think rights of people are defended only through the courts. We need class struggle to defend the rights of the people. And those bourgeoisie must know when they begin to treat workers like this, that the Communist Party will not stay idle, will not keep quiet. We will work with the trade unions. We will also execute other means to make sure that they can listen to the working class. We must condemn that escort's attitude to dismiss workers in this form. But it's an expression of arrogant capital. So therefore, Makaban, in closing, we want to highlight few points. Just as an emphasis from even our own declaration. We have to tackle this crisis of unemployment in our country and insist on the right to decent work for all our people and ensure that the working class poor living in the townships and in the midst of pollution, without home care for children, no facilities for playing, including in my own township, by the way. Some of the former professional soccer players in my own township, Mbongeni, have visited me, led by Comrade Otebogo Mokoena, the football professional, and others, and my brother Peter. And they said, no, but what's happening? All the playing fields in the township are being closed. We are not planning for our people. Existing open spaces are being closed. Where are our young people and children going to play? So, as we fight for this decent work for all, we must use these jobs to create infrastructure in our townships. We must fight for environmental justice for all our people as a critical key tributary to our South African struggle for socialism, our program that we have accepted in this Congress. We must ensure that we continue to put people before profit as a commitment of our daily conduct in the work of the Communist Party. We must ensure that ununionized workers across federations are unionized. That's the task of a working class party. We must organize them and strengthen the unions. We must organize workers in the informal sector and organize as well foreign national workers. This is important because if they are left unorganized, they get more exploited as cheap labor by big capital. And they are then pitted against local labor or local workers. Therefore, we need to work with them to build this powerful socialist movement of the workers and the poor and insist indeed on the acceleration of land reform in our country and ensure that farm workers and labor tenants who are living on subsistence farms recover their rights. That at some point, the Communist Party characterized them as the rightless workers. Households that are, for instance, living on floodplains and in dangerous riverbanks must be assisted on a nationwide program of government. We must not only wait for disasters to strike before we step up to try and help our people. We need to ensure that there's enough and proper public transport. The struggle of taxi drivers and taxi owners, it's our struggle. Yes, it's our struggle. We must also unionize. We helped as the Communist Party to unionize a union of taxi drivers here in Gauteng, led by Comrade Matebula. So, in this respect, where, for instance, the taxi industry is having these huge difficulties, Minashu, because we are also responsible for the taxis here, transport. You must create a party unit that deals with the transport sector in Gauteng, for instance, using your proximity to the sector to understand much more kind of interventions that we need to make. So in this regard, the call for assistance by this sector is important, because in the failure of us providing reliable, safe public transport system, they are the only means available for the working class and the poor in our country. We must continue the fight again for universal basic income grant and ensure that we continue to fight other alternatives to enhance sustainability of our people in terms of their livelihoods, and continue to work to defeat state capture and to build a democratic developmental state. And we must call on our public sector workers, on patriotic professionals, on progressive journalists and all to work to fulfill the mandate of serving the people as a whole, in particular to serve the working class. This experience we had, the report we gave from the 14th Congress Central Committee about state capture, our analysis, should not happen in your watch, public sector professionals. We must also insist in our communities on safety. I just heard Comrade Makura, David, our premier here in Gauteng. He was our first national convener, not convener, how did we call them, comrade? Because the national convener was Comrade Dipuo Mvelase, and I was made a deputy as the national organizer of the party. Then we had the national coordinator. He was the first national coordinator before that task was taken by Mama Bolu, Jacob, to relaunch the Young Communist League. He's our cadre. That cadre who was here today, he apologized for not having able to arrive that other time because he was sent by the president for urgent task to address the SIU, I think. He managed to arrive at this Congress. He was briefing me about progress made to arrest the people who massacred our people in Alexander, gangsters. Now today we hear that other people have been killed in Soweto and Lenasia. Our people are now being massacred like this. We certainly have to spring up. Cloaks. We defended the township. At one point, under the commandership of this man, Chachela, it was a small unit that defended the township from the side of Polapark or Kalinyon, Buyafoot, and everywhere else. From the area where attacks on our community was based. Why today, when we are free, we cannot remobilize our society to defend itself against criminals and violence? We need to launch a massive campaign against crime in our communities. Comrades in the Free State, you still owe us a visit to reorganize the community of Virginia, where one of our comrades, a PC member, was mercilessly killed by a criminal who freely roamed the streets of Virginia. This campaign, as we relaunch it, we are going to Virginia. We are going to start there and cleanse it of those known criminals. And it must spread and be launched across all parts of our country. We must fight gangsterism, Makaban. Sing our Sabama gang. There's no self-respecting revolutionary who's afraid of gangs. Tina, the gangs respected us. Yes, they respected us. And they knew they could not do mayhem in our communities in our presence. And if they tried something and the comrades were there, they will disappear very soon. When we have grown our movement like this, everywhere we go, our communities must feel safe. The gangs must run away. This should be the task coming out of this Congress. Of course, all those issues are around protection racketeers, largely in the Western Cape. I see now this method of killings, particularly in Gauteng, you can see it's linked with this racketeering method that we have discovered in the Western Cape. We must equally, in the same breath, fight against substance abuse. All these sections, we must organize fronts and work with other organizations as we constitute to build this powerful socialist workers' movement of the workers and the poor. Lastly, on the international, my comrades, is to re-emphasize our common resolutions that we have taken. But from this podium, I equally need to say, we need to continue our unwavering solidarity campaigns and programs. First, with that beacon revolution, socialist revolution of Cuba. That revolution of Cuba no longer belongs to the Cubans. It's an international revolution of the workers and the poor, of the working class, of all socialists. It's our revolution. Therefore, defending the Cuban revolution is to defend socialism everywhere. That is why, on the strength of socialist Cuba, we have helped our comrades, and we need to continue solidarity with our comrades in socialist Venezuela. Venezuela is socialist, the biggest socialist country today, almost beyond China, in Latin America. The single biggest, well-organized, grassroots-based socialist system. We must strengthen our solidarity with the Venezuelan revolution, with the revolution of the people of Nicaragua, that is also facing serious challenges from imperialist America, with the people of Bolivia. They even removed Evo Morales, for instance, from power. Of course, the masses brought his organization back into office. And in other parts of Latin America where progressive revolutions are taking root, they need our solidarity. And we can learn from them as we are also fighting for a socialist South Africa. We need to strengthen our solidarity with Palestine. That's why I'm wearing this. Comrade Bazam, thank you. And I'm wearing this equally in honor of my dear friend, Comrade Jack Gavenda, who had an opportunity to visit Palestine, and we met President Yasser Arafat. Gavenda, as you know, died in Swaziland on an internationalist mission. That revolution in Palestine it's now the epicenter of imperialist aggression in the Middle East by America. They've even imposed their own Israeli headquarters and their own embassy, American embassy in East Jerusalem, where they've never dared to even think they can occupy that land, but they are doing it by force. The Palestinians are losing their land every day. They are losing their sovereignty every day. They've even made this two-state solution question unviable, much as the PLO and other progressive forces continue to call for it. Because of belligerent American imperialism in the Middle East. The Palestinians, their struggle is ours. We must continue our solidarity with them. The same as we should continue our solidarity with Western Sahara. And Polisario. Morocco, that has been treated with kid gloves by African governments. African governments and leaders must be told they cannot freely go all over the continent and yet protect an oppressive state right on our continent, continuing an imperial Spanish project over the Sahrawi people, deny them their self-determination and independence. The Communist Party must never accept that. Former President Abdelaziz of Western Sahara was the one that gave us those weapons. He gave MK its first tanks, which were tanks from the apartheid regime that they captured in battle against Morocco. And when they saw where these camps were made, they called President Tambo and said, no, we captured your military tanks used by wrong people. They said, this properly belongs to you. We must pledge our solidarity, Comrade Angola, Ben Martins, to those comrades in Western Sahara. Those are our people. The same we must do, comrades, with the people of Sudan, especially in the liberated zones, under another General Abdelaziz, the people's general, who continue to protect the Nubians, the original Africans from the Nuba Mountains. If you learn the history of Africa, you will know at some point some people called it Nubia. The Nubians, they have been annihilated. And this general is defending them. He's defending the people of Sudan for their self-determination. Those we can never forget. Sabir, their chief rep, is here. You must continue to send our unwavering support to the solidarity with the people of Sudan, including in mainland Sudan, where recently the military have stolen the people's struggle led by women. And upon victory, when women fought against inflation, against increasing food prices, the military came and stole the women's victory. We must pledge solidarity and reverse these denegations. Equally, the people of South Cameroon. We have not paid enough attention to French imperialism and French colonization that continues on the African continent, especially in southern Cameroon, where the British literally sold out our people to their French counterparts and made them lesser people. Those Africans in southern Cameroon, in Ambazonia, are our people. The Communist Party in its programs must be clear on the African agenda as well. The African agenda is our international agenda too. Of course, comrades, the menace right across our borders in Swaziland. This, we have to have a time frame to force Swaziland towards freedom. We cannot continue a situation where people are killed willy-nilly by a dictatorship in our doorstep that completely relies on us or almost landlocked by us, and yet it does as it pleases with its own people. Our own revolution, Pudemo, there was Comrade Manda Tlachwayo here, founder member of Pudemo. Pudemo, on its establishment, President Mlungis Makanya from Pudemo, we can also tell you, if you talk to your leaders proper, they will tell you. It was a joint collaboration with the ANC. Our own Babalas Buluga Mbongeni was in that unit with Comrade Charles Ngakula and others that helped to set up that movement in order to facilitate our own operations from Mozambique into South Africa. And therefore, That movement and the solidarity with the people of Swaziland remains an important struggle for us. Mswati's dictatorship must come to an end, and South Africa must provide appropriate conditions to stop that dictatorship. We have the power, we just need the political will to do so. We cannot allow our people dying day in, day out, and we continue to say solidarity that is intangible. Every solidarity must be tangible. Yes, that's practical solidarity. And of course, lastly, to salute our comrades from North Korea. Ambassador, I must indicate that Comrade Krizani, one of his last 2 international visits, our General Secretary was killed in order to derail our freedom. One of the last countries he visited was North Korea. He led a delegation of the communist leaders, Central Committee members to Korea, DPRK. We will have to undertake a new visit, Slal. We need to take a visit, Slalo, a party visit. I know we went there. You were in a different cap. And by the way, I must congratulate you. You are the first South African minister to visit DPRK as minister. You must do it again. Nothing stops you from doing that. We must visit the DPRK. It's an important country for us in the socialist world. It's free. It's sovereign. It's independent. Even when the war started way back in the 1950s by imperialists that divided the Korean people into 2 countries continues, because that war has never been declared to an end. There's still a front line. We must go there and pledge our full solidarity and cooperate materially, tangibly in our solidarity. That's the struggle of the working class. In other words, we must be committed to fight against imperialism and its modern vestiges, including how it's characterized itself now as a form of modern slavery, this imperialist discourse. We want to say, comrades, thank you very much for your contributions in this Congress. To all our delegates, give feedback and report back to our structures. We have adopted a declaration and resolution by this 15th National Congress of our glorious party, covering a wide range of areas. I wish to conclude by stating that the Central Committee will lead to taking forward all the outcomes of this 15th National Congress, not least the resolution on state power itself. That resolution is important, that is clarified dialectically, because this Congress was quite advanced. Slal, it was quite advanced. It adopted a sophisticated resolution on the question of state power. You must be proud of yourself about the adoption of this question. I'm very happy that we are becoming that extremely sophisticated communist party. We must be sophisticated in all angles. In this regard, we must give feedback to our structures. I wish to thank all delegates, guests and members, including the media, all who set their times as well as their resources aside to attend our Congress, even the media who covered our 15th National Congress. As you go home, please drive safely and arrive alive. To all those who contributed to the success of this Congress, we say thank you. To the working class of our country, this 15th National Congress has rejuvenated your revolutionary working class party. It's a tool in your hands. Use it the way you want. It's your party. Join it. Join our Young Communist League. These are new instruments in your hands. Use them to end your exploitation and slavery. Amandla! Forward to socialism, forward! Long live the SSCP, long live! Long live the Alliance, long live! Down with capitalism, down! Thank you very much, Comrade Chairperson.
Comrade Vuyiswa apparently was coming down here. She's the only person who's got the information. She's not answering her telephone. I asked that they organize that she came to see me when
Don't go away, comrades. And send Pelelo Morale. After such a powerful speech by our new General Secretary, it's still early, comrades. Ipati yasetshenziswa. Awushongiswa. Ipati yasetshenziswa. Ala. Ayitholwa ngethenda. Hi.
I'll check with you.
Comrades,
This is a figure of Shimobolio, Oliver Taken. We had no side to give you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. We appreciate it.
safe journey back home.
Viva Chavez.
Yes, viva Hugo Chavez, viva. Amandla! Amandla! Comrades, can we just sit down so that then we properly bring everything to a conclusion. Sicela sihlale phansi. Ayihlale phansi ibambe umthetho. Ayihlale phansi ibambe umthetho. Hlala phansi. Hlala phansi. Hlala phansi. Aye, there are still comrades who are still standing there. Hlala phansi. Hlala phansi. Comrades, let me take this opportunity to thank our General Secretary for a very inspirational closing speech, bringing to a close this 15th National Congress of the SACP. I can't give a speech after the General Secretary has spoken. But I can just say this. You know, Nopala, when I was listening to you talking about your experiences of building the party, especially after 1994, I was saying, wow, is it not a task that we have actually, some of us, to write a book about the SACP post-1994? And also collect experiences from comrades in the provinces, in the districts. I think it would be important because the post-1994 period has got its own unique and complicated features. It's one thing to build a communist party whilst fighting a repressive regime, and it's another thing to build a campaigning communist party when at the same time we are part of the government. Maybe it's something that we need to do. The other thing, comrades, that was being raised by the General Secretary about our theme and building a powerful socialist movement. The issue of a left popular front, which was our previous resolution, which the political report tried to relate, maybe inadequately. Perhaps we can ask Nopala, our theoreticians, to write a position or a discussion document on the relationship between this task of building a powerful socialist movement of the workers and the poor and the building of a left popular front or left popular fronts. I think that is important because the two things are dialectically linked, so that our structures can be able to discuss and debate. Comrades, the GS has given us the line of march. And I think it's important that in implementing this, coming out of this Congress, we should also use back in our structures the documents that have come out of this Congress. I would say the main ones is the political report. It mustn't die here, that political report of the Central Committee. It must be taken back to our structures as a document for engagement, discussion, and empowering our structure. The organizational report must also be taken back for discussion. I would also say the financial report, which is a critical one in terms of understanding the challenge we are facing and what to do in raising resources. Obviously, our declaration will become part of that, as well as the resolutions that we would have taken here. That's our homework, comrades, going back to our provinces. The General Secretary highlights the need to intensify the struggle against neoliberalism. And also, I don't want to repeat highlighting how parasitic neoliberal elements are benefiting from load shedding, interestingly enough. Load shedding, he is saying, has also become a site for profit accumulation, especially those who are selling diesel to Eskom. Comrades, thanks very much You don't realize, by the way, by electing me as national chairperson, how much powers you have given me. I have got powers to dissolve this Congress. Me and me alone, completely dissolve it. Watch this now. I'm getting there closely. But let me thank you, comrades. Thank our General Secretary. Thank our newly elected officials for guiding this Congress. Thank to the 14th Congress Central Committee for convening this Congress. And we are definitely coming out of this Congress being coherent and purposeful. And thanks to you as delegates. However, we need to learn appropriate lessons and reflect on this Congress as a whole. And what challenges are some of the experiences from this Congress are being posed, and what is to be done in order to strengthen, unify the SACP, this glorious and this important political organ of South Africa's working class. Comrades, whatever challenges we have had good discussions. Yes, we may have taken almost a day extra than we had planned, but we've done virtually all what we're supposed to do, with the exception now of the outstanding votes and the results. Now, I hope you will support this and there won't be any debate. What we are suggesting now, comrades, is that we officially close Congress. But those provinces or structures or individuals who have not voted, please go to the voting station so that we are able to vote. Now, what we are requesting, so that we don't then have to come back and reconvene, because we do not know how long the counting can take. It can easily take 5 hours because of the numbers of people that are involved. We don't know. So in order then not to detain you here, we close the Congress. We request you then to give us, as the newly elected officials, to receive, in the presence of hopefully observers. There can be observers who can remain, who are around here, we are not going early, that we receive the results on your behalf as these delegates of the outcomes of the Central Committee, and then we will send those results to the provincial secretaries and the national secretary of the YCL, and also, with your permission, publish them publicly so that the country will know who is the Central Committee of the South African Communist Party. Are we agreed to that? Can I get as a mover to support this proposal I'm making? There is a hand there at the back. Tell us who you are, comrade. Sorry. There's the mic. Is it working? We can hardly hear from here. Comrades, are the microphones closed now?
Thank you, Comrade Blade, our newly elected chairperson. I am Comrade Sello Makamza Mulekwa from Mudimule, the home of Commander Teenage Monama. I second your views that we definitely, on our behalf, the CC, take over whatever information is coming to you on our behalf, publicize it if it is possible, so that when we get home, we get the good news. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I suppose the YCL flag is supporting in support. Am I right?
Yes, Chair.
Thank you very much. And there is no objection. Gauteng is supporting. And so you leave it to us, comrades. We will do our best to ensure that everything goes smoothly. We receive the results and so on. I don't know if there is any urgent announcement before I exercise my powers. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Comrades, on behalf of the newly elected national office bearers of the SACP and the Central Committee to be elected, and by virtue of the powers given to me by yourself as this Congress, I now officially declare the 15th Congress of the South African Communist Party closed and dissolved. Safe journey back home, comrades. Please travel safely. Amandla! Thank you very much.